Let's draw and paint this thatched roof house in the English countryside. We will use a reference photograph by Susan Roghair to paint this interesting and almost cartoonish looking cottage. You can refer to this reference photo throughout this video on the top left of your screen. I am going to use technical pens to draw the outline followed by photo ink to paint it. The paper I am using for this painting is called Posterboard or modeling paper. Posterboard is a smooth white paper similar to cardstock paper, but it is very thick. It is not as absorbent as watercolor paper. So the color tends to pool on the paper rather than getting readily absorbed. And it is not necessarily a bad thing. We will learn to use this characteristic of the paper to our advantage. You can substitute the photo ink that I am going to use for this painting with watercolor or colored acrylic inks. If you do not have access to technical pens that I am using here, you may get a similar effect using a ballpoint pen or a gel pen. It's important to keep the line work loose at this stage. Observe how I am drawing somewhat broken and wobbly lines here. Wobbly lines create a feel of hand-drawn lines, and in my opinion, they look better than the ramrod straight lines drawn using a scale. But it is my opinion and my way of drawing. I don't claim that it is the best way. You are free to experiment and find out what works for you. You will notice that I did some mistakes while drawing. The popular misconception is that any mistake in pen drawing cannot be fixed. It's true that some mistakes cannot be fixed, but almost all of them can be hidden. You will see a first-hand demonstration here of how to hide such mistakes. Use scribbles to draw the foliage around the house. There is no need to draw every leaf in detail. We just need a feel of the foliage around the house. While drawing trees, do not draw continuous lines for the tree trunks. Foliage will overlap the tree trunks at various places. We want to keep space for this overlapping foliage. Now I will switch to using a black brush pen to block the darkest values. I use brush pen when I need to block bigger shapes. It is more convenient than using a pen, and it serves my lazy nature best. If you do not have a brush pen, you may use a thick-tipped technical pen or paint the dark masses with black ink using a watercolor brush. You may observe that while blocking doors and windows using the brush pen, I purposely leave out some areas blank. If you block the full area of a doorway or a window using black paint, it may end up looking like a hole in the paper rather than something tangible. Painting the foreground foliage using the darkest values automatically makes the cottage brighter in the viewer's eye. Now I will use a technical pen with a thin tip to block some shadows. These shadows are a notch lighter than the darkest values we painted with brush pen. I am going to use hatching techniques for this shading. Space out the hatching strokes in accordance with how much dark you want these shadows. Use close spaced hatching strokes if you want darker shadows and vice versa. When I draw the hatching strokes over this window behind the foliage, observe how I am avoiding drawing pen strokes over the foliage. This creates an effect of the foliage seeped in light. Now fill out the lighter parts of the foliage using scribbles. This unifies the darkest values of the foliage that we painted using brush pen with the lighter values. It is time to draw textures and details over the roof and the rest of the cottage. Observe how I am keeping the details minimal. Now let's finish this drawing. Then we will begin the painting process. This is our finished drawing. Let's paint this now. As I said earlier, I am using photo ink to paint this drawing. Photo ink has a highly saturated appearance, so I need to be careful about not making the color too gaudy. You will not face this issue if you are using watercolor. You will also notice that the paint is pooling on the paper rather than getting readily absorbed. This is a characteristic of the Posterboard paper that I am using. If you use watercolor paper, the color may appear somewhat different due to the rapid absorption. This is okay. There is no one right or wrong method in art. For the cottage itself, I am using highly diluted paint with warm colors like brown and yellow. Since the cottage is fully lit with sunlight, it is important to keep the colors mild. For the shadowed areas that we have shaded using hatching strokes, I used brown paint. For the brick walls in the upper part of the house, first paint using red color followed by brown. Use blue paint for the door frames and windows and grey tint for the patio frame. Use green and yellow randomly to paint the foliage. I decided to keep the paint outlines fluid. I believe that it creates a more interesting appearance in the painting. For the tree in the background, I use warm colors to introduce some variety. If you like this demonstration, press that like button and consider subscribing to this channel. Also press the bell icon to receive a notification whenever a new video is uploaded. You can check out my books about drawing and painting on my website huesandtones.net. And thus, we have transformed this drawing into this colorful painting. Happy painting!